Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed, red hand. There was one redaction where he's listed as a co-conspirator, and we invited you in. This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. 40 minutes before the moment that would ignite the room, before the headlines, before the clip began circulating across every platform that matters in American politics, Thomas Massie already knew exactly what he was going to say. He was not improvising. He was not reacting emotionally. And he was not walking into that hearing with vague suspicions or partisan talking points. He had spent 2 days inside a secure Department of Justice reading room, reviewing the unredacted Epstein files line by line, page by page, knowing that what Congress had ordered released to the public did not match what he was reading behind closed doors. What he found was not a rumor, not an interpretation, not a theory, but a specific redaction in a specific FBI document that could not be justified by any legitimate reading of the law he himself had helped write. And when you understand that part first, you understand why what happened next did not look like theater, but like a confrontation built on documentation. The House Judiciary Committee oversight hearing on February 11, 2026, was already tense long before Massie's turn arrived. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse were seated in the gallery, dressed in white, silent, but unmistakably present. Their presence transformed what might otherwise have been another procedural oversight session into something morally heavier. Cameras were mounted at every angle, red lights blinking, reporters filling the back rows with laptops open, waiting for something that would cut through the noise of partisan repetition. Attorney General Pam Bondi sat at the witness table, posture composed, expression measured, flanked by staff members who had spent weeks preparing her for predictable attacks. Democrats had already accused her department of shielding powerful men while exposing victims, and Republicans, up to that point, had largely defended the Department of Justice's process as an imperfect but sincere effort at transparency. The law at the center of this confrontation had been passed only months earlier. In November 2025, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna introduced the Epstein Files Transparency Act, a bipartisan bill requiring the Department of Justice to release all unredacted records related to Jeffrey Epstein without carving out safe havens for wealthy associates or politically connected figures. The bill passed Congress and was signed into law, carrying with it a deadline that the DOJ was legally bound to meet. When the deadline arrived, the department released millions of pages, but thousands of redactions remained scattered throughout documents that were supposed to reflect full transparency. Some of those redactions exposed victims' information while obscuring the names of powerful men, a discrepancy that did not go unnoticed. Massie had warned publicly that the redactions made no sense, that the law did not authorize selective concealment designed to protect reputation over truth. He and Khanna had openly discussed contempt proceedings if the Department of Justice failed to comply fully, signaling that this was not going to be another performative dispute resolved with a press statement. The unredacted files Massie reviewed in the secure room revealed something precise and undeniable. In one FBI document, an individual was flagged internally as a potential co-conspirator in Epstein's criminal network. In the public version released by the DOJ under Bondi's authority, that same name had been blacked out. That was not a question of privacy for a victim or the protection of a minor. It was the concealment of a billionaire's name in a co-conspirator context. When the hearing began, Democrats took the first swings. Representative Jamie Raskin accused the Department of Justice of running what he described as a massive Epstein cover-up, arguing that transparency had been promised but not delivered. Representative Pramila Jayapal demanded that Bondi turn around and apologize directly to the survivors seated behind her, an emotional appeal designed to underscore the moral gravity of the moment. Bondi declined, insisting that the department had balanced transparency with legal obligations and ongoing investigative considerations. She pivoted repeatedly to criticizing the prior administration and Merrick Garland, framing the controversy as a continuation of inherited complications rather than a failure of current leadership. That rhythm was familiar, almost predictable, and until Massie spoke, the hearing followed the well-worn script of Washington oversight theater. Democrats accused, Bondi deflected, and Republicans largely framed the department's actions as reasonable under complex legal constraints. The temperature in the room was high, but it was not yet combustible. Massie sat quietly, papers organized, waiting not for a moment of outrage, but for his allotted time. Those who have watched him operate know that when he asks a narrow question, he already knows the answer. He is not fishing for headlines, but building a record. When his turn finally arrived, there was no raised voice, no rhetorical flourish, no attempt to match the emotional tone set earlier. He began calmly, almost conversationally, addressing Attorney General Pam Bondi with a directness that immediately altered the energy in the room. He stated that he had spent the week reviewing the unredacted Epstein files and had identified a discrepancy in a specific FBI document listing individuals connected to the investigation. He held up a printed copy, highlighted not for spectacle, but for precision, signaling that what he was about to ask was grounded in the record and not in rumor. Then he asked the question that shifted the atmosphere from partisan exchange to documented confrontation. In that FBI document, he explained, a name appeared flagged by investigators as a potential co-conspirator in the Epstein case. Yet in the version released publicly by the Department of Justice, that same name had been redacted. He did not accuse. He did not editorialize. He did not speculate about motive. He asked, simply, why the name of a potential co-conspirator had been concealed from the American people under a law that required transparency. The silence that followed was not the routine pause before an answer, but the tightening stillness of a room that understands something significant is about to unfold. Bondi shifted slightly, glanced toward her staff, and began to recite the standard defense about balancing transparency with privacy and investigative equities. Massie did not allow the answer to float into abstraction. He clarified that he was not asking about process in general, but about one specific redaction in one specific document. He stated clearly that the individual in question was not a victim seeking anonymity, and not a minor whose identity required protection. The person had been flagged by the FBI internally as a potential co-conspirator, and that fact alone made the redaction legally and morally consequential. His tone remained steady, but the edge sharpened as he repeated the question, focusing the hearing like a lens narrowing on a single point of light. Then he said the name aloud for the record, Les Wexner. A billionaire. Former CEO of Victoria's Secret. A man whose documented relationship with Jeffrey Epstein had long raised public questions, including the extraordinary fact that he had granted Epstein power of attorney over significant financial matters. Wexner's name appeared thousands of times across the Epstein files, but in this particular document, in the context of potential co-conspirator identification, it had been blacked out in the public release. Massie did not shout the name. He stated it plainly, and that simplicity made it impossible to dismiss as grandstanding. Bondi attempted to recover by noting that Wexner's name appeared thousands of times in the files that had been released, implying that no effort had been made to conceal his connection broadly. Massie cut in gently, but firmly, acknowledging that fact while returning to the narrower issue. The question was not whether Wexner's name appeared elsewhere. It was why it had been specifically redacted in the context of potential co-conspirator designation. The distinction mattered, and everyone in the room understood that it mattered because it was the difference between general association and investigatory implication.